We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Hey guys! This is part 7 of What If Naruto Became a Demon King. During the second stage of the Chunin Exams, Orochimaru made a terrible mistake in blocking the seal that held the Kyuubi. He gave birth to a being with more power than Raizen himself. Watch as Uzumaki Naruto takes the world by storm as the new Demon King. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 14, A Prelude of What's to Come. Sorry I'm late, Naruto-sama. Kyuubi said with a bright smile as she looked at Naruto. That smile turned into an embarrassed blush as Naruto suddenly appeared right next to her and began rubbing their cheeks together. Kyu-chan! He cried out as he rubbed his left cheek against hers affectionately. I should be totally pissed at you for interrupting what had to be the most awesome fight I've ever been in. But you're just so damn sexy in that outfit that I can't even bring myself to care about that. And Naruto-sama, Kyuubi replied embarrassingly. She tried to push the blonde off of her, but he seemed to know she would do that and stuck to her like glue. Eventually several tick marks formed on her head and she smashed the flat end of her sword against his head. Oi! What was that for? Asked Naruto, rubbing the newly formed lump on his head. He sniffed a little as crocodile tears formed in his eyes. That really hurt, you know. That was for embarrassing me, Kyuubi said, not falling for his games. He had been playful enough during their time in Makai that she knew all the tricks he had, and knew the most effective way not to fall for them. For example, when he began to form those false tears in his eyes, it was best to just ignore him as you would a child. He would stop eventually, she just had to be patient. But I missed you, more tears began pouring out of his eyes. However, Kyuubi just rolled hers. He had tried the fake tears before and it hadn't worked then. What made the blonde think it would work now? Yes, and I missed you too, Kyuubi said, giving him a quick peck on the lips. Now, you're in a battle, remember? Oh right, Naruto grinned almost sheepishly as he turned to face the 3 S-ranked ninja who were staring at the two uncertainly. Your sexiness made me forget all about them. Kyuubi rolled her eyes as she placed the blunt end of her nodachi on her shoulder. I'm sure. Naruto turned back to the group and gave them a smirk. Now, how about we continue right where we left off? The 3 S-rank shinobi just stared at the blonde and the redhead, blinking olishly as different thoughts went through their head. Naruto-sama, that was the first thing that crossed Kisame's mind as he saw the hot redhead that just came strolling into the middle of their fight with the kick-ass looking sword. Why is it always these bishinen pretty boys who get all the girls? Everywhere they went he never got any looks, other than the oh my god he's blue and has gills kind of looks. It was always Itachi who got the girls swooning over him. And he never did anything to the girls making cow eyes at him. Just ignored them like he did everyone else. Damn that Itachi. Now this brat, who despite looking much older than his 13 years was still only 13 and had the hottest female Kisame had ever seen in his life calling him Naruto-sama. It just wasn't fair. He was an all-powerful S-ranked shinobi wanted in Kiri for killing a number of their nobility. Wasn't that worth something? Didn't he have the baddest thing going for him? Why wasn't that enough to get the chicks? It's the gills, isn't it? Kisame lamented. Or maybe it was because he was blue. He could never figure it out. Meanwhile, Itachi was analyzing everything that had happened so far since the battle had begun. Out of all of Akatsuki members who came to capture the blonde former Jinchuriki, not that Naruto was aware of their actual reason for fighting him, he was the one who could see Naruto with the most clarity. And what he saw disturbed him. Having assumed he was using the Kyuubi's Yuki when that reddish-black energy began leaking out, Itachi had activated his Mangekyo in the hopes he could use the Sharinga's latent ability to suppress the Kyuubi. Unlike Madara's famed ability in manipulating the Kyuubi, Itachi's could not do that, but it could push it back. However, when he activated his Mangekyo and got ready, he saw that the power Naruto was using was not the Kyuubi's. It was all his own. The reddish-black energy that could not be anything other than some kind of demonic chakra belonged solely to Naruto. Even worse, the feeling Itachi got from the Yuki being put out by the blonde was much stronger than what he had felt that night 13 years ago when the Kyuubi attacked Konoha. It did not have the killing intent, nor the bloodlust that the Kyuubi had during the attack. No, this was just pure, unadulterated power. More power than anything Itachi had ever felt in his life. And it was this which disturbed him more than anything else. He turned his attention to the redhead and his eyes widened. Though he could sense she was suppressing her power greatly, he could see it rolling off her in subtle waves with his Sharingan. A red energy that was far more powerful than him, Kakazu and Kisame combined. The only thing they had to be thankful for was that the girl's power was not as strong as Naruto's. Not that this knowledge was much of a consolation prize. For just a second, the image of a raging nine-tailed fox appeared behind her. Itachi's eyes widened and in the next second it disappeared, leaving him wondering if there might be a problem with his Sharingan, because what he had just seen should not be possible. Possible or not, Itachi was no longer confident of their chances of victory. Naruto had been keeping pace with them and already killed one of their members, and he didn't seem winded in the least. That meant if they wanted to survive the day they only had one option available to them. Kisame, Kakazu, Itachi said. The situation has become unfavorable. We must retreat. What? Kisame asked, looking at his partner. Ah, come on Itachi. Surely just because this babe's been added to the equation doesn't mean we should give up. We have been at a disadvantage since the beginning, Kisame, Itachi said. Even with the information leader Sama gave us on the Rinnegan, we had no clue about his other powers. It's clear continuing to fight at this moment is ill-advised. TCH, alright, Kisame grumbled. He looked over at Naruto and grinned. Looks like it's your lucky day, Squirt. We won't be able to rumble with you anymore. Ha ha ha. Naruto laughed. You shouldn't speak so confidently after what Itachi just said. The blonde grinned and tapped his ears. I heard the entire conversation. Do me a favor, tell your leader that if he wants something done he should gather more people. Oh, and he should probably come here himself. If he's strong enough that S-ranked ninja are following, then he'd probably give me a good fight. Kisame smirked. Ha, we'll be sure to remember that. As the three ninja disappeared, Kyuubi turned to Naruto with a raised eyebrow. You're just letting them go? Yep, Naruto replied, his nonchalance making Kyuubi gain a tick mark on her head. With you here, killing them would have been too easy. Hopefully, when they show up again I'll get an even better fight. Figures that was your reason, Kyuubi muttered. You're just like Raizen-sama, always looking for a better fight. You day that like it's a bad thing, Naruto joked. It's not a bad thing, I just don't think it's conducive to your health, Kyuubi replied. Well, in order to get stronger I need to fight, right? Said Naruto. So if I let them go it gives them the opportunity to get stronger and give me a better fight. As far as I can see it's a win-win situation, I get a good fight, and they get to live longer. Kyuubi rolled her eyes but didn't reply, his answer was exactly what she expected. Like Raizen, Naruto loved battle, and if given the option of letting an opponent live so they could give him a better fight another day, he would do so every time. You'll be pleased to know that I've informed the Kitsune clan council of your existence, Kyuubi said, smoothly changing the subject. And, everything is in place, she answered. We're currently gathering members of the clan that have been scattered across Makai. It will take a while as the demon world is a big place, but I'm confident that we'll find all of the members within a year. I've also spoken with them about becoming your personal summons. Many seem intrigued by the idea. I take it if you don't? Said Naruto. Some seem to think it's beneath us, Kyuubi said with a frown. She might have said more, but their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Shikamaru and the rest of his squad. The three ninja plus 3 dogs ran up to them and stopped just a few feet away. Damn, troublesome blonde, Shikamaru muttered, you know we caught your explosions from the city. Perhaps you could go a little farther out next time? You nearly caused a panic with the civilians. He looked at the area that had been a battlefield just a few minutes previously and shook his head. The entire land was littered with craters, trenches and scorch marks. It looked like a maelstrom had passed through the place, pun very much intended. And did you have to destroy the entire place? Man, this is so troublesome. Oops, Naruto said sheepishly. Guess I got a bit carried away. Won't happen again. Whatever. Shikamaru muttered. His eyes panned over to Kyuubi and he frowned. Who's she? Ah! That's right, introductions, Naruto said. Right. Team, this is Kit. He studiously ignored the way Kyuubi's eyes twitched at his name for her. She a friend of mine I met while training for the Chunin Exams. Kit, those are Nara Shikamaru, Aburame Shino, Inazuka Hana and the Haimaru Sankyodai. Kit? Are you serious? Is that the best you can come up with? Naruto only just managed to keep his face impassive at the disgruntled sound in Kyuubi's voice. Yeah, well, you came on rather short notice and I had to come up with something. I couldn't just say, by the way guys, this the Kyuubi no Yoko. You know, the demon lord that nearly destroyed Konoha. Oh, but don't worry, she's totally cool and a real demon in the sack. Yeah, that would go over well. But did it have to be Kit? Naruto blinked at the whine in Kyuubi's voice. What's wrong with Kit? I thought it was a decent name considering I only had a few seconds to think of it. Why Kit? Because it's short for Kitsune. Naruto gave the mental equivalent of a shrug and received what amounted to a facepalm. Hello, greeted Hana while Shino gave a nod of acknowledgement and Shikamaru just yawned. A pleasure, Kyuubi said politely if a bit reserved. Naruto knew it was because she didn't like humans, but was being tolerant of them because of him. Hopefully, she would come to see that humans weren't so bad after interacting with them a bit more. So what did you guys find out on Tsunade? Asked Naruto once the introductions had been made. Well, she's no longer in town, Hana replied. I went to a few gambling parlors and it seems we just missed her. She was in a few days ago and left yesterday. Her heading was north of here, so there are several possible choices of location. With what we know of Tsunade, it will likely be the place with the largest casino, Naruto said. In that case you'd want to go to Tenzaka, said Kyuubi. Everyone including Naruto turned to look at her. What? I've gambled on occasion, she defended. During her tenure in the human world, after being forced to leave Makai, Kyuubi needed some way to get money to live. While she could have seduced rich men to make do, the thought of seducing a human was repulsive to her. So she had taken to gambling, and considering she had the luck of a fox, pun very much intended, her streak of winning had at one point been almost as legendary as Tsunade's streak at losing. Then I suppose that's where we're going, Naruto determined. We'll rest up in a hotel tonight and make our way to Tenzaka tomorrow. With Naruto's decision made, the group plus Kyuubi made their way back into the town to find a place to sleep. As they walked through the town, Naruto found that Shikamaru was correct. Everyone seemed to be talking about the large and rather destructive battle that Naruto had with Itachi and the other S-rank ninja. Naruto wasn't sure if they knew he was the one in the battle, or if it was just the fact that he was wearing his ninja garb, but many of the people were looking at him, or perhaps the group in general as they moved. A few people even pointed and began talking about them. Naruto, who had enhanced hearing, listened in on a few of the conversations around him. Hey, did you hear those explosions just a few minutes ago? Yeah, I heard there was a battle. They say several powerful shinobi were fighting. I heard the shinobi were fighting a demon. Naruto almost snickered at that last one. It was undoubtedly just a rumor people made up for the mass amounts of destruction Naruto had caused. It was also unknowingly the most accurate description of what happened. Finding a hotel was rather easy. There were several dozen around the town and the team of Konoha shinobi and Kyuubi chose a small hotel called the Lazy Panda. They ended up getting 3 rooms, one for Hana and her dogs, one for Shikamaru and Shino, and another for Kyuubi and Naruto. Shikamaru and Shino had both looked at them oddly at that, but shrugged it off. Shikamaru because he just didn't care, and Shino because he was too tactful to say anything. Hana might have said something, but despite having been apart for the better part of a week, Naruto's scent was all over Kyuubi. It wasn't all that hard for an Inuzuka to figure out. And even if she had been willing to question them, it was none of her business, and both Naruto and Kyuubi exuded that alpha-like aura of power, and Hana had no desire to be on the receiving end of their ire should her questions prove invasive. So she left with nothing more than a simple goodnight. Meanwhile, Naruto sighed as he sat in the same seat he had been using ever since dropping Kin off at the hospital. It had been nearly a week now, and he had been coming in every day to check up on her. However, the young kunoichi had yet to wake from her coma-like state. While he had not been allowed into the patient's room very often, the doctors had let him see her a few times, and from the dulled, glazed-over eyes, Kin wasn't in a good way. The blonde was actually beginning to wonder if she would ever wake up. He was also beginning to get bored. Most if not all its time was spent sitting in the waiting room at the hospital. Usually his day consisted of sitting in the exact same chair day in and day out, waiting for a comatose patient who only had a slim possibility of actually waking up. The doctors had told him that there was something like a 1 out of 10 probability that the way Kin's mind had forced itself to shut down would never heal, and she would remain in a vegetable-like state for the rest of her life. A few had even suggested he might be better off leaving and letting them send a message if she ever began to respond. Not that he could leave even though he wanted to. Orders were orders and it wasn't like it could do anything else. He didn't have any money so he couldn't buy ramen, he even had to sleep outside in a tree and used a stream 2 miles outside of the town to bathe and wash his clothes because he couldn't rent a hotel. Having lived on the plains of Makai for the first 3 weeks of his training, he was used to much worse. Compared to the barren wasteland he had lived in there, the blistering hot days, freezing cold nights and the possibility of having demons pop out of nowhere and attempt to kill him sitting in a hospital all day was a walk in the park. But just because his current situation wasn't difficult didn't mean he had to like the current situation he found himself in. As far as Naruto was concerned, monotony killed far more easily than any demon ever did. In an attempt to alleviate his boredom, Naruto let his mind wander to that of the girl he saved. Of course, saved was a completely relative term. According to the doctors, by the time he had found and brought her to them she had been raped an uncountable number of times, by somewhere upwards of 40 people. It was difficult for them to know for sure. The doctors here were good, but they weren't shinobi. They had no medical jutsu that would let them know just how bad a wound is, or anything specific information on their patient's problem. And they had told him that much of the sperm the men using kin had shot into were unidentifiable because the cells had more or less meshed together, likely due to her being used by different people one after the other, they said. His thoughts on the girl, as they were all humans, were as always since his rebirth into a demon, confusing. Personally, he didn't much care for her, she wasn't a friend, or even an acquaintance. He didn't know her and had no interactions with her beyond watching her battle with Shikamaru. Beyond and above that, she was a human, and while Naruto didn't hate or even mildly dislike humans as a whole, and would consider a few of them friends, he didn't like them either. His feelings on humanity in general could be more described as indifference or apathy than anything else. Of course, the same could be said for any demon that wasn't Kyuubi. The life and death of someone he didn't know just didn't bother him like it would have before Orochimaru forced Kyuubi's Yuki to activate his demonic heritage. Now if he had considered kin to be one of his friends, that would have been a whole different set of kunai. But as things were, he had no feelings of personal attachment to the girl. That still didn't mean he approved or even liked the things that had happened to her. While he didn't give a damn about the life or death of someone, demon or otherwise, that he had never met. Naruto had adopted a code of honor that was derived from a combination of his old Nindo when he was still a human, and Raizen's own code of honor. Both had been similar enough that there was very little he needed changing to create an adapted code for himself. One of the most important parts of his code, which both he and Raizen had agreed, was that rape was a despicable act. Whether the rape victim was a demon or a human didn't matter, the act of rape, having sex with an unwilling person, was not only an offense to Naruto's sense of honor but also the actions of someone who was so pathetic no woman would be willing to sleep with them. And it was for this reason that Naruto decided to help Kin. Because she had been raped. Not just raped, but raped multiple times by her own comrades and superiors. People she should have been able to trust implicitly had used her like some kind of cheap whore. Worse even, as at least a whore would get paid and only had to deal with one person at a time. While he himself had never been raped, he did live in the red light district, a place where rape happened on a regular basis. He could clearly remember his first experience in learning what rape was. He had been 5 years old, going on 6, and had not yet even entered the academy. The orphanage had kicked him out, claiming that because he was entering the ninja academy they were no longer responsible. Thankfully, Sarutobi had found him when he was wandering around looking for food and got him an apartment. Unfortunately, because the people who owned the apartment complex hated him, they kicked him out as soon as they were sure the Hokage wouldn't check up on him. They waited for about a month, before claiming that because he couldn't pay his bills, which were 3 times higher than anyone else's, that he could no longer live in their complex. Having been young, naive and more than a little stupid, Naruto hadn't questioned the man and tried to find an apartment. He had thought about going to the Hokage, but it had been nearly impossible to get a meeting with the man. As Hokage he was very busy, and according to the secretary he was always in a meeting whenever he showed up. Once again, not really questioning whether or not what the woman said was true, Naruto decided he would find an apartment on his own. And he did, in the red light district. The blemish of Konoha, a cesspit filled with cutthroats and gangs. Most people think Konoha was just the beautiful village with thousands of trees spread throughout it, the glittering new buildings, shops and houses that line the main streets. Or the massive and expensive-looking clan compounds and mansions in the nobility section of Konoha. This was because the council made sure no one of importance ever saw the red light district. Naruto was sure they had even paid off some of the Hokage's shinobi to overlook the area on their routine sweeps of the village. It had been during one of his scavenging hunts that he saw it. Naruto had been looking for food in one of the dumpsters. He had used up all his pay on the apartment and he couldn't go to the office that worked the funds for orphans going to the academy for another week, so he had been forced to make do on his own. While he had been scavenging, he had heard a woman's muffled screaming. Perhaps it had been his own innate sense of curiosity, or maybe even at that age he had felt a need to protect others. Whatever the case was, Naruto found himself following the screams and cries that had attracted his attention. It was when he had looked around a corner that he had seen them, 2 men and 1 woman. The woman was naked, she had been gagged and one of the men had been holding a knife to her throat. Both of the men had their pants and underwear pulled down, and one of them had been plowing into her with reckless abandon while the other had roughly grasped her breasts, all the while holding a knife to her neck and telling her that if she didn't shut up he would slit her throat. The woman had cried and squirmed but didn't fight back. She had been defeated and let the 2 do what they wanted, and Naruto, scared, confused and unsure, had ran off before they noticed him. He had done his best to put that moment out of his mind, hiding the memory behind lock and key like he had so many other nightmare-giving memories. However, memories like that never stayed hidden for very long, and all it usually took was one incident to bring them back to the surface. "Excuse me, Uzumaki-san?" Naruto looked up after hearing his name called to see a pretty brunette nurse holding a clipboard looking at him. "Yes, that girl you brought here, she woke up just a little while ago," the nurse said. "I figured you might like to see your friend now that she's awake." Naruto didn't correct the woman's title for their relationship. He just stood up and smiled at the woman. "I'd like that, thank you." The nurse led him through the hallway and to a door with a wooden plaque numbered 25. She unlocked the door and opened it, gesturing for Naruto to enter. The room was pretty much conducive to every other hospital room Naruto had ever been in. The walls were a bland shade of white, there was a cabinet with medicine, a desk for the doctor, a hospital bed with a sheet that could be moved around it for privacy, 1 window, and a small plant near the door. As if people thought one measly plant would be enough to bring color to such a dreary room. Tsuchi-kin was sitting upright in the bed. She didn't look good, her face was still pale and her eyes were frightened. But she was at least awake, and Naruto could see the spark of awareness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Hey there," Naruto said, getting the girl's attention as he walked further into the room. The dark-haired girl's eyes snapped over to him, they widened almost comically. However, the fear that showed in them made the situation anything but funny. The kind of fear that the dark-haired girl held in her eyes was almost overpowering and seemed like an instinctual reaction, rather than the logical kind of fear a shinobi might use to push their senses and physical bodies to the limit in order to escape death. Kin let out a loud shriek, both of pain and fear, as she dove into the bed. Naruto blinked, not at all expecting that kind of reaction. He walked a few more steps into the room. "Hey, are you alright?" Before he could finish his last sentence, Kin began screaming again, though this time words were involved. "Please don't hurt me. I promise I'll be good. I won't fail him again. I promise. Just please don't hurt me." Naruto had no clue what was going on. While the blonde had seen the action of rape take place, he had never seen the aftermath of what happened to rape victims, so he didn't know what to do in a situation like this. Thankfully he didn't have to. The screams must have alerted the people working in the building, for a few seconds later a female doctor and 2 nurses, both female as well, entered. "What's going on here?" asked the doctor in a slightly rushed voice, having obviously just come in because of the noise. "I don't know," Naruto said, looking confused. "I was told Kin was awake and I just came here to see if she was alright. Then she just started screaming the moment she saw me." "Right, out you go then," the doctor said, beginning to push him out the door. "I'll find out what's wrong. Please wait patiently outside." Naruto sighed a bit as the door closed behind him. He walked over to the opposite end and leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. He wasn't sure how long he waited, but it must have been at least half an hour before the doctor came out. She spotted him as soon as the door opened and made a beeline for him. Before he could even ask how Kin was, she cut him off. "How well do you know her?" Naruto blinked in a bit of confusion but answered the question. "Not very well. I know she was a competitor in the recent Chunin Exams that Konoha hosted, and was a kunoichi for Otogekure. But not much more than that. I know that my team had actually fought against her while I was unconscious, and I saw her fight against a comrade in the preliminary matches. And do you know of her situation? Of course I do, Naruto said, almost scoffing. He was actually somewhat offended that this woman thought he didn't know what had happened to Kin. I was the one who brought her here after all. I was also the one who saved her from being used in a ninjutsu that required a living sacrifice. The woman nodded, seemingly satisfied with his answer. What we have here is a typical case of rape, only on a much larger scale. The woman flipped through the sum of the sheets in her clipboard. One of the more common reactions that a rape victim will experience is fear. And according to the information I have says that she was raped multiple times within at least a several-week time span. That kind of thing induces a lot of fear, especially of the opposite sex. Chances are just seeing a male will be enough to set her off. What else can you tell me about this? Asked Naruto, knowing that the more information he had, the better off he would be to deal with this. Fear will probably be the most pervasive feeling she experiences, said the doctor. Fear about their environment, about their health, about their personal relationships. Rape between people who know each other is especially likely to cause suspicions about personal relationships. In fact, there is some evidence that the better the victim knows the assailant, the greater is the devastation to her personal life. This is because an attack by a friend or acquaintance can cause someone to suspect even those she had previously trusted. Despite the type of attack, it is common for women to fear the response and reaction of family and friends. Naruto frowned. He didn't know much about Kin's situation. He didn't even know if she had a family. Still, she had been raped by her superiors. Had she known all of them? Had she trusted any of them? They had been working for Orochimaru, a man who was well known for being any sort of trustworthy. Then again, Kin had also been working for him, but there may have been extenuating circumstances that had forced her to work for him. There was a good possibility Orochimaru had given one of those "work for me or die" threats he was so fond of, or maybe she had been seduced by the promise of power. That was also very probable. And once she had been ensnared by the Hibi-san, it was undoubtedly impossible to get out of his service. If that was the case with her, then others may have had similar situations. Was there anyone she had trusted that had also been in Orochimaru's camp? Had she trusted her teammates? Naruto sighed as he realized he would need to find that out at some point, so Kin would have someone she was comfortable in the presence of around. But at the moment that was neither here nor there. He looked back at the doctor. So what else can you tell me? She will likely doubt herself, she said. Because she doubts herself and feels unclean, it is easy for her to assume that others feel the same way about her. She may become suspicious in her personal relationships, and avoid social contacts which might have been normal for her previously. When a person has been subjected to another person's will, her sense of her personal power may be seriously threatened. She may lose faith in her own ability to make the right decision and to exert any form of independence. Indecisiveness and increased dependence on others are common characteristics following a rape attack. Now, there are 3 steps that most rape victims go through. Shock. During this phase, the victim may suffer from acute anxiety, fear, and guilt, and observable reactions can vary from hysteria to numbness. Denial. During this stage, the victim attempts to forget the whole thing. She will probably discuss the incident very little, will deny any strong feelings of hurt or anger, and will attempt to return to her daily routine. Integration. Despite attempts to return to business as usual, many rape victims realize that the attack has played a more important role in their lives than they had realized. Recurring nightmares, uneasiness about the environment, and difficulties with personal relationships often continues to plague them. Prolonged effects of the attack may force a woman into a healthy reevaluation of the incident and its impact on her life. Now, first and most important steps in the integration process is for the victim to acknowledge her own feelings of hurt and anger toward her assailant. Girls and women who are subjected to this kind of attack often find it inappropriate to feel hatred or vindictiveness and may only increase the tension in themselves by trying to deny such feelings. Likewise, once a victim can admit to herself that she feels some guilt about the attack, she can begin to examine the source of that guilt. Once she understands that much of it comes from the myths about rape which she herself has accepted, she can feel more secure about how she handled her situation and can stop projecting her own self-doubt onto those around her. There doesn't seem to be much I can do to help her with this, Naruto admitted with a frown. He sighed. He would need to find her someone who could help, because he couldn't actually understand what she had been through. So she'll be afraid of men, he muttered, looking at the doctor. Would it help if she was talking with a woman? Yes, she shouldn't feel any fear from a woman. Naruto frowned as he checked his stores of yuki. The energy was much more potent than chakra and allowed for him to last longer, but he had still been alive for around a week. Even without using any jutsu, he was bound to have been drained significantly. Fortunately, he seemed to have enough for what he needed to do. Going through a few hand seals, Naruto was engulfed in a cloud of smoke. When it dispersed, the doctor's eyes widened when she saw that in the blonde-haired male's place was an absolutely drop-dead gorgeous woman with an ample bust, thin waist, firm hips and mile-long legs. The female doctor couldn't help but feel a spark of jealousy towards the beauty in front of her. "Do you think this would work?" asked Naruko, which was the name of Naruto's Oiroke form. Sure," the doctor said stupidly. "Good." Naruko left the stumped doctor in the hallway as he opened the door and entered the room. Kin looked up the moment the blonde entered, but relaxed when she noticed it was a girl. "Hello," Naruko said with a smile as she sat down. "Hello, do I know you?" asked Kin. "Well, sort of," Naruko replied, rubbing the back of her head. "I was a competitor in the Chunin Exams." Kin's eyes widened in recognition at the name. "How come I don't remember you?" "Oh, you do," Naruko replied. "I'm sure of it, in fact, your team even fought my team." Kin's brows furrowed in thought as she heard Naruko's words. She couldn't remember fighting this girl during the Chunin Exams. Naruko seemed to notice this and said, "I'll give you a hint, it was during the second stage." "The second stage?" Kin blinked. "But the only blonde girl we fought during the second stage was that Yamanaka. I don't even remember seeing you." "Oh, I didn't say you fought me, just my team," Naruko said with a smile. "I was unconscious for most of that fight, and by the time I woke up you were unconscious yourself. But the only other blonde I even remember seeing was..." She trailed off and her eyes widened. "Bingo," Naruko said with a wink. "Boo, but wait. I thought you were a guy." Kin all but shouted. "There's no way you could be that Uzumaki kid. I specifically remember him being a guy." Ninja here?" Naruko said, pointing to herself. Kin blinked at the answer. She looked at Naruko, her brow furrowed. Reaching out, she grabbed a handful of Naruko's breasts, eliciting a squeak of surprise. What are you doing? "These are definitely real," Kin said. "Therefore there is no way you can that Uzumaki kid." Naruko's eyebrows twitched. "First off, the name's Naruto, Naruto. Not Uzumaki kid. Secondly, this isn't a henge, this is a real transformation. A Kage henge, shadow transformation, if you want to call it something. So this is a real transformation?" asked Kin, frowning some more. "Yep," Naruko said, swiping a thumb under her nose as she grinned proudly. It was a decidedly Naruto action. "I was playing around with the hand seals, trying to find out how they work. I'd been channeling my chakra, and I guess I wasn't paying attention to that, because the next thing I knew I was a woman." "So you're really a woman?" asked Kin. "While in this form?" "Yes." Kin nodded, as if she had been expecting that answer. "And why would you transform into a girl?" Naruko looked at her and tilted her head. "Because when I came in here in my guy form you flipped. The doctor told me it was because..." She trailed off, coughing into her hand before continuing. "Anyways, I figured you'd be more comfortable with me in this form than my other one." "Oh." Kin had to blink in surprise at that answer. Especially when she realized that despite knowing the person in front of her was a man in some kind of super transformation, she actually was comfortable with her. Or as comfortable as she could be in the presence of a complete stranger. "Well, thank you for being so considerate, I guess." "No problem," Naruko said cheerfully. "And now that we have all these questions out of the way, I have a few things to tell you." Kin raised an eyebrow, like Orochimaru is dead and I'm the one who killed him. Kin nearly choked on her own spit at hearing those words. She looked at Naruko to see the girl was dead serious. Kin couldn't detect a lie anywhere in her voice. "So Orochimaru is really dead?" asked Kin. Naruko nodded. "Yep, Orochimaru is dead, and the invasion failed. Thanks to you, in fact." "Me?" Kin's eyes widened, and this time it was comical. Naruko almost giggled at seeing the way the other girl's jaw dropped. Naruko nodded her head. "You see, I was going back to Konoha from my training when I ran into the place you were being, kept." She noticed Kin wince but continued. "After I saved you, I interrogated the shinobi there and found out about the invasion. So really, the whole reason the invasion failed was because of you. I guess that makes sense, Kin mumbled. She looked down at her hands, which were trembling slightly. Naruko noticed this and leaned down to see the girl's face, and was surprised to see tears. Hey, are you okay? Asked Naruko. Come on, please don't cry. Even in this form I could never stand seeing a girl cry. I think it's even worse in this form because I feel so much more emotional. Kin seemed to giggle, or Naruko thought she did. It was a very strange sound. Naruko wondered if she had done or said something wrong. But when the dark-haired girl looked at the blonde, there was a smile on her face. Thank you, Kin muttered, wiping at her eyes. It took Naruko a moment to realize what Kin was thanking her for. But when she did, Naruko smiled as well. You're welcome. Now, I was hoping to ask you something, and seeing how I doubt you're going to want to go back to Oto. Kin interrupted her with a snort, and Naruko smiled. I thought so. Anyways, I have a proposition for you that I want you to think about. Kin looked at Naruko oddly for a moment. What is it? She asked, causing Naruko to smile. Well, for the rest of the night, Aburame Shino, Inuzuka Hana, Nara Shikamaru, and everyone else who had gotten a room to stay the night at the Lazy Panda Inn was subject to the moans and screams of pleasure from Naruto and Kyuubi until well into the morning. Within her room, Inuzuka Hana and her Ninken were forced to listen to Naruto and Kyuubi rutting like dogs in heat. Thanks to their strong hearing, the cries of ecstasy emitting from the pair were nearly 3 times louder to them than anyone else. Hana, red-faced, embarrassed and horny due to the grunts and groans she could hear, she still did her best to block out the sounds of sex. Oh gods! Yes! Right there, Naruto-sama! At a particularly loud shout from Kyuubi, Hana's face took on a shade so red it looked like a solar flare. On either side of the bed, the Haimaru Sankyodai whimpered and covered their faces with their paws, as if the action would somehow help block out the noises the two demons made. I know how you boys feel, Hana said with a groan. If this keeps up, I may have to take a cold shower. The 3 Ninken looked at each other at hearing their master's words and just whimpered some more. Chapter 15, Gambling Old Hag. So you failed to capture the Kyuubi Jinchuriki? Asked Pain, his voice holding no emotion, though many of the members were sure he was displeased. Not only that, but he somehow managed to kill Haiden. He was using some kind of weird chakra that I've never seen before, Kisame said, giving his input on the matter. When I tried to let Semihade eat it, his chakra actually damaged it. I see. He was also far stronger than we thought he was, Itachi added in his emotionless tone. He managed to fight off all 4 of us without much effort, and killed Haiden by vaporizing his entire body. Pain turned to a man who looked like he had been swallowed by a large plant. Were you at least able to retrieve the ring? No, Leader Sama, Haiden's entire body was destroyed, the plant said, his voice switching from a light tone to a more evil one and back again. There wasn't anything left of him, not even ashes. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki is stronger than we had assumed. This is going to be a problem. Shall we go after him again? Asked Kakazu. No, Pain shook his head. Without knowing how powerful he is, we would just be wasting resources. We'll start searching for the other Bijou and Jinchuriki before moving on to the Kyuubi. In the meantime, I want a portion of our spy network dedicated to learning everything we can about the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. All of the members agreed, not like they could do anything else since Pain was the one in charge. One by one the images began to flicker out, leaving only Pain, Konan and the masked man known as Madara. It seems he is going to be more trouble than we first thought, Madara commented lightly. Perhaps, Pain conceded. However, this is merely a setback. Should he become too much of a problem, I will go after him myself. Then he will face the will of God. Very well, see to it that you do not underestimate him. As Madara vanished, Pain narrowed his eyes at where the man had been. Soon, Madara, I will not have to listen to you, he said, though only Konan was around to hear him. And you shall know the pain of what happens when you try to control me. You will face the wrath of God. Kyuubi gave a gratifying sigh as she rode another wave of pleasure caused by the blonde above her. As her orgasm diminished, the redhead leaned up and kissed Naruto for all he was worth. Their tongues dueled, and it was only oxygen became an issue that they let up. Smiling at him, she said, "We're going to need to get up soon." "I know," Naruto said as he looked out the window. Sunlight was beginning to stream in, small rays of light that hit the bed and a few that were getting dangerously close to his eyes. He sighed. "It's too bad, we didn't even get to test the full limits of our stamina." Speak for yourself, Kyuubi thought with a sweat drop. While she had been able to keep up with him for this long, Kyuubi knew she would have dropped if Naruto decided to go another round. Just how much stamina did Naruto have? The others will probably be getting up soon. Getting himself off of Kyuubi and out of bed, Naruto stretched himself out, smiling widely as he heard his bones crack. He looked back at Kyuubi, who was just beginning to sit up, smiling as he held a hand out. We should probably take a shower so we don't smell of sex. Well, I am feeling a tad dirty, Kyuubi said, grinning as she took Naruto's hand and let him help her up. Are you going to help me get clean, Naruto-sama? Standing up, she winced a little as a small pain jolted between her thighs. She took a step forward, only to stumble and fall as her legs gave out on her. Naruto quickly caught her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her closer to her. Hey, you alright? Asked Naruto, frowning a little as he felt her body give out on him. I'm fine, Naruto-sama. Kyuubi said. He felt her try to stand again but already knew it would end in failure. He could feel her entire body shaking against him. No, you're not fine, Naruto frowned. Acting quickly, he slid one arm under her legs and the other around her shoulder, sweeping her into his arms and cradling her like a babe. Looking more closely, he could see her eyes were drooping closed. You're exhausted, he sighed. Why didn't you tell me you were getting tired? She hadn't even given him an indication she was tired. I didn't want to disappoint you, she mumbled, her eyes closed and her head falling onto his shoulder. Naruto's frown grew rather prominent before he closed his eyes. Idiot. Ha! Kyuubi opened her eyes to look at Naruto in bleary confusion. You're such an idiot, Naruto mumbled as he leaned his head down and nuzzled it against her own. Frowning a little, Naruto closed his eyes in concentration and focused his yuki. He molded it, imagining it taking shape before releasing it in a single small burst. Opening his eyes, he watched as the reddish-black energy flew off of his body and landed in front of him. It began to morph and take shape, twisting and growing, gaining 4 appendages, 2 arms and 2 legs before gaining a head. Once the general outline of the energy took on a human form, it began to solidify until a perfect copy of Naruto stood in front of him. Already having its orders, the clone proceeded to the bathroom. Soon the sound of water could be heard from inside. You've gotten better at controlling your yuki, Kyuubi mumbled with a small, proud smile on her face. Naruto chuckled, a rumbling sound that emitted deep in his chest and made Kyuubi relax against him. I had a good teacher, he said lightly as he sat down on the bed and sat down. He placed Kyuubi on his lap and began stroking her hair, a grin making its way to the blonde's face. After the invasion, I had made a couple thousand clones outside of Konoha and finished the next exercise you had given me. Oh? Kyuubi had given Naruto a set of exercises to complete in case her time in Makai had lasted longer than they both expected. Which one did you complete? The one where I had to balance on a needle with my yuki, Naruto said, frowning as he remembered the exercise. Where I have molded my yuki to a finely honed point on the tip of my finger, then create a flat plane under the needle so that it doesn't sink into the ground at some point while trying to hold my weight. Ah! Kyuubi said, yawning. That's not bad at all. You only have 5 more to go then. She giggled. Though even with 5,000 Kage Bunshin, these next ones are going to take a few years to complete. So you've told me, he said dryly, not needing a reminder of just how hard the next series of exercises were supposed to be. Do you always have to remind me? Yes. Naruto rolled his eyes as he continued running his hand through her hair. Having been keeping an ear open to listen, he heard when the water was cut off. A second later, the blonde's clone came in, grumbling about how lazy his creator was. Said Original snickered, making the clone glare at him. The tub is full as whole. Thank you, Naruto said with a small smirk. He didn't know why, but he had begun finding pleasure in pissing off and antagonizing his clones when they weren't training. Maybe it was because they were all a bunch of disrespectful little shits. If they are, then what does that say about me? Whatever, prick, Kage Bunshin, Naruto mumbled, snapping the blonde out of his thoughts. Naruto snickered as he stood up with a now sleeping Kyuubi in his arms. Stick around, he called out to his clone while walking into the bathroom. I may need you in a little while. The door closed behind the blonde, leaving the clone to sit on the well-used bed and grumble. Your clones have never gotten along, Kyuubi mumbled as Naruto walked over to the bathtub. It was filled with water, hot enough that a light steam was rising from it. Naruto knelt down and gently placed the red head in the water, letting her head rest on the towel laying on the lip of the tub. Kyuubi sighed in content as she let the warm water seep into her skin. "This is nice." Naruto chuckled as he grabbed a sponge and began to wash Kyuubi. "I like to say my clones and I just have a special relationship," Kyuubi snorted. "Yeah, special. Let's go with that." Cha. Letting herself relax so completely, Kyuubi actually felt like she could fall asleep, and she might have had it not been for Naruto's attentive and gentle hands as he washed her. She couldn't help but love how tender the blonde's touch was. He not only washed her but massaged the sore parts of her body that had gotten sore from their 8-hour sexathon. The last part of her the blonde washed was her hair. When he finished cleaning her, Naruto pulled the plug on the drain and wrapped a towel around the red head before lifting her up. He carried her back into the bedroom where the clone was sitting on the bed meditating. The copy ignored its creator and Kyuubi as Naruto set her down on the bed and dried her off. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Tired," Kyuubi admitted, "but good as well. I could get used to this." Naruto just chuckled as he finished drying her off and placed his mate under the covers. "So you like when I take care of you, Kyuubi-hime?" asked Naruto with a teasing grin. "And here I thought you were supposed to be taking care of me." Kyuubi stuck her tongue at the blonde, causing him to snicker a bit before caressing her cheek. "Get some sleep. You can pick up kin in a few hours. I've got to meet my team, I'm sure they're awake by now." "Okay," Kyuubi mumbled, her exhaustion having finally caught up with her as she jumbled words together. Naruto watched as her breathing slowed down to signify she had fallen asleep. He leaned down, kissed her forehead, before standing back up. "Keep an eye on her," he said to his clone. "And when she leaves, go to Konoha and inform Tsunade of what he needs to know." "I got it," the clone said, waving the blonde off. The blonde copy wondered why its creator always insisted on giving them vocal commands when it already knew what he wanted. He was more or less talking to himself, so it wasn't as if the Kage Bunshin couldn't understand the blonde just as well as Naruto could understand himself. That was one of the many oddities of the Kage Bunshin technique. Each clone was a perfect copy of Naruto, it had half of his power and could use all of the techniques the blonde could. If they focused, the clones could even see through the eyes of the original and vice versa. And yet despite this, each clone was also distinctly different from their creator and each other. Because they were individuals, could think and act for themselves, they sometimes thought differently than Naruto despite being copies of the original. It was something both Naruto and his clones wondered about from time to time, though they never cared enough to dwell on the subject. Naruto nodded and walked out the door, closing it behind him. Turning around, he was about to make his way down the hall to rouse his team, only to find that they were already awake. "Hey you three," he greeted cheerfully. "I'm glad you're all, awake." He trailed off as he got a good look at them. "Are you guys all right? You guys look kind of tired." The blonde's words were something of an understatement. Hana, Shikamaru, Shino and the three Ninken with Hana all looked dead on their feet. Their eyes were bloodshot and they had black bags under them. The Himura Senkyodai had their ears drooping and the three humans were swaying ever so slightly on their feet. They had definitely seen better days. "You guys look like you've stayed up all night." At the blonde's words, a tick mark formed on the heads of the three Konoha ninja as they glared at him. Why are you guys glaring at me like that?" The glares only seemed to intensify. "Did I do something wrong? Guys? Hey. Where are you going?" he asked when the three abruptly turned and began walking away. Wait up. Guys! As the four Konoha ninja left the town, 7 other people were watching them. "Is that him?" "Yes. The blonde one, right? That's the son of Namikaze." "Yes. Finally. We'll have our revenge." "Yes. Soon, Minato Namikaze shall suffer just as he caused us to suffer. Let us see how he likes it when he's the one losing the people he loves most." One day later, the light began streaming through the windows in the hospital. Small rays of sunlight struck the bed, prompting Tsuchi-kin to wake up as the light hit her eyes. Opening them, Kin blinked several times before letting out a shriek as ruby-red eyes stared back at her. "Hello," Kyuubi said brightly, finding a small level of amusement in the surprise she had caused in the girl. Who are you?" asked Kin, looking slightly freaked. How long had this girl been here? And who was she? While Kin was no censor, she was fairly good at knowing when other people are near her. Having lived in Oto for most of her teen life, learning to tell when someone was within her personal bubble was something of a necessity. That this girl could get completely past the small space where her sixth sense could detect everything was astonishing. I came all this way to escort you back to Konoha and you don't even know who I am, Kyuubi huffed, crossing her arms under her chest. This had the effect of pushing the redhead's breasts up, an action which Kin noticed. The dark-haired girl's eyes traveled to Kyuubi's bust, which was both one of largest and most firm she had ever seen. Granted, living in a village like Oto, she could admit to have not seen many women, as most missing ninja kunoichi stay away from the village due to Orochimaru's disreputable character and reputation for being untrustworthy. But that didn't make much of a difference to Kin, who couldn't help but stare at the woman's breasts. "See something you like, dear?" asked Kyuubi, raising an eyebrow. Kin blinked as her eyes went from the beautiful woman's breasts to her eyes. She blinked in surprise several more times before the words registered in her ears. When they did, Kin blushed, her face taking on a deep red hue. Even her ears and neck began to turn red. If she gained any more color, Kin was sure her head would spontaneously combust. Kyuubi actually snickered a little as she watched the girl's face turn red. "Now, if you're done staring at my chest, perhaps we could get a move on and I can take you to Konoha. Naruto-sama wants me to get you there within the next few days." It took a few seconds, but at hearing the name of the man who had rescued her, Kin managed to get her blush under control. She looked at Kyuubi for a second as her mind registered the title the redhead had given to the blonde. Naruto Sama. The honorific the woman had used made Kin pause. The use of suffixes had long been a tradition in the elemental nations, while some had disregarded the practice in the last 50 years or so. Most still use them. Use of the Sama suffix often referred to one of a much higher rank than others. Usually, people who were of royalty or noble status, the leaders of a village such as a kage or mayor, were the ones who were called by such a respectful honorific. The redhead's use of the Sama suffix surprised her, mainly because Naruto was not royalty as far as she knew. It meant the redhead, who Kin had actually assumed was royalty herself because of her beauty and magnificent warrior-like outfit, held a great amount of respect for the blonde. "That is what you will be calling him as well," Kyuubi said, standing up from the seat she had taken. She tossed the raven-haired girl a pair of simple black pants, black shirt and a beige traveling poncho with a hood over it. Kin grabbed the clothes, blinking as she examined the fabrics. They were unlike anything she had ever seen. The fabric was so soft and felt almost like silk to touch. Yet at the same time she could feel how sturdy it was. She wasn't sure what they were, and while she didn't have much of a fashion sense, she could tell these clothes were above the quality of anything else she was likely to find. "The fabric of those clothes are very special," Kyuubi said, directing the young girl's attention from the clothing to her. "Not only are they nearly indestructible, but on the off chance that you do get any rips or tears in them, channeling your chakra through them will fix these right up." The clothes had actually been commissioned by Naruto before he had left for the human world after his training in Makai had finished. When he had first gone to Hesuki and asked for him to make clothing that relied on chakra to fix it, rather than Yuki. It had been a surprising request and not one Hesuki would have normally taken, mainly because like most demons he had no love for humanity. However, when both the descendant of Raizen and Kyuubi herself were the ones making the request, there was just no way he could say no. "So cool," Kin muttered. Grabbing at the clothing she was about to begin putting it on, then she remembered Kyuubi standing beside her. She turned, red in the face, and was about to tell the redhead to leave. Only to blink when she saw that Kyuubi was already gone, the door shutting closed with a light click. Kin stared at the door for a few seconds longer before getting out of bed. She wobbled a little, having been comatose for nearly a week and then confined to a bed for another few days. The level of physical fitness she had aspired to wasn't what it had been. Wincing a little, Kin used what strength she had to get dressed and then walked towards the door. Opening it, she saw Kyuubi standing on the other side, arms crossed and tapping a foot against the floor. When she noticed Kin was ready, she raised an eyebrow and asked, "Ready?" Kin nodded and Kyuubi turned around. "Good, I was getting tired of waiting for you. Now let's go." Kin nodded again and followed Kyuubi to what would be her new life. With Naruto, Tanzaka-gai. Naruto looked around Tanzaka-gai in interest. "You definitely couldn't say it wasn't a lively town." The city was very large, with a wall surrounding it and a large castle located on the south side. There were tons of adults, mainly men, bustling around the entire city. This was because Tenzaka-gai was a city well known for its gambling parlors, casinos, pubs and women. One of the many pleasurable services the lucrative city possessed were the many beautiful women who worked at the bars and pubs in Tenzaku that offered themselves at a price. Naruto noticed that for every shop, restaurant or hotel, there was a brothel right next to it. It reminded Naruto of the red light district he lived in, except without the complete scum and high crime ratings. Okay, Shino. Do your thing. Naruto watched as his bug-using teammate began to discreetly send out his Kaichu bugs into the city. It would take somewhere around an hour for Shino to seed the whole city with his bugs, but once he had the Aburame air would be able to find and differentiate between all of the chakra signatures in Tenzaka-gai. Hana? Naruto said, turning to the Inuzuka and her 3 ninken. He gave her a scroll that he had grabbed from his pocket. That contains the article of clothing with Tsunade's scent. I believe you know what to do with it. Of course, Hana said while the Haimaru Senkyodai all barked and wagged their tails, as if agreeing with their partner. Grabbing the scroll she unsealed the contents, which emitted a puff of smoke that soon cleared away. What kind of sick pervert would have a pair of Tsunade-sama's panties? Asked Hana as she held up a small purple thong, her eyebrows twitching violently. Erosenin, Naruto groaned, face palming. Of course, I should have known that damned pervert would have something like this. Blinking in confusion, the blonde had a thought occur to him. Wait a second, how in the hell did Erosenin even get these? Tsunade is known to be absurdly violent against perverts, and I heard she almost killed him once just for peeking on her. Who is this Erosenin? Asked Shino. Naruto turned to look at his Aburame teammate, blinking for a moment. Oh! His face gained a look of recognition. I forgot that you guys wouldn't know who he is. I was talking about Jiraiya. Wait, do you mean Jiraiya-sama? Asked Shikamaru, his eyes actually opening in shock. Of the Dansetsu no Sennin? That's the one, Naruto replied dryly. He also happens to be the world's largest pervert and author of the Ika Ika Paradise books that Kakashi loves so much. The guy was such a large pervert that he had more or less abandoned his godson to the wolves that called themselves Konoha citizens so he could peep on women in the hot spring and write his perverted novels. Though Naruto had to admit he liked the novels, they had given him many ideas that he and Kyuubi had tried during his 1-month training in Makai, and last night. I had not known he was the author of those books, Shino said. Since he is the sensei of your father, I assume you know him well, Uzumaki-san? Not really, Naruto said with a sigh. Aside from his perverted tendencies, the only 2 things I know about him are that he's my Tusan sensei, and my kyofu. Anyways, let's get going. Hana. Do you have a scent? I do, but it's muddled, Hana said. She looked at her 3 dogs, they were wagging their tails and barking as they sniffed the ground. After a few minutes of sniffing they looked up at her and whined. Sighing, she shook her head. There are too many scents to properly follow it, and I think it's being masked by something. Like scent killers or something else. Right. Naruto sighed, this would make finding Tsunade that much harder. They could still find her using Shino's Kikaichu tracking, but that would take longer. Even if they could pinpoint the woman's location, finding her within such a large crowd would be difficult. Then there was the fact that even if they did, she could slip away entirely unnoticed. Naruto couldn't power his way through this kind of situation. There was no enemy to fight and overcome like with Orochimaru or his tangle with the 4S-ranked ninja at Oto Fujingai. Here it was all about stealth, intelligence gathering, and recon. And Tsunade had 50 years' experience in being a ninja over them. Though Naruto was still confident in his abilities to track her, while his skills may be a bit rusty as he had not pulled a prank, his talents in stealth were legendary among the ANBU. Uzumaki-san, I have found 2 strong chakra signatures, Shino informed everyone. He tilted his head, allowing a ray of sun to hit them. One is around the same level I felt from 3 of the ninja you faced, while the other is probably around the level of your average jonin. Lead the way, Naruto said, gesturing for Shino to take the lead. The bug-using shinobi led them all to a large gambling parlor. It was quite a bit more extravagant than the others in the area, with a large neon sign in front and flashing lights all around it. Truth be told, Naruto thought it looked pretty tacky, but who was he to complain? So this is the place. Shino nodded, yes. Alright, you guys know the plan, Naruto said. Shikamaru, create a parameter in case Tsunade tries to escape. Shino, you stay with Shikamaru. Leaning down, he grinned at the three dogs. I want you three to stay with them as well. Hana, you're with me. Hana blinked. What do you need me to be with you for? A few days later, Konoha. I spy with my little eye. Ugh, not this again, Izumo groaned and held his hand in his face. Come on man, just knock it off. You've been trying to get me to play this game for hours already. It's not like there's anything better to do, Kotetsu complained. All we do is sit around here watching this stupid gate, and nothing ever happens around here. It's not like some dangerous S-ranked ninja is going to be walking right in through the front gates or anything. You know, considering we just had an invasion a few weeks ago, I'm not sure you should be talking about something like that happening, Izumo said. You might jinx it. Jinx smicks. No one in their right mind would attack us now, Kotetsu replied with certainty. I mean, not only did we come out of this invasion nearly unscathed save some cosmetic damage, but we also got our Yondaime Hokage back. And we have his son. No one would be stupid enough attack us. Hey, you alright man? Asked Izumo after his friend trailed off uncertainly. He looked at his friend whose eyes were glazed over. The spiky-haired man was also blushing and drooling like an idiot. Hey! Kotetsu! Kotetsu! Snap out of it man! Izumo snapped in front of Kotetsu's face, getting nothing more than a single blink. Excuse me. At hearing the very feminine and sensual voice, Izumo turned, and found himself in the same stupor his partner was. Standing in front of him was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. With long red hair, ruby-colored eyes that were even more exotic than Korean eyes, luscious red lips, large, firm breasts, slim waist and mile-long legs. She was everything a woman should be. I was hoping I could get signed in, the woman said, pointing towards the clipboard in Izumo's hand. That is what I need to do in order to enter Konoha, right? Alright, Izumo said dumbly. Behind him Kotetsu nodded his head. Kyuubi smiled as she grabbed the clipboard from Izumo's numb grasp and began filling out the proper forms needed for 2 civilians entering Konoha. Once finished she handed the clipboard back to Izumo, who took it out of sheer instinct. Thank you, Kyuubi said, standing back up. She looked behind her. Come. The redhead walked past the 2 Chunin in the guard booth, leaving the 2 guards in an utter stupor. The pair walked down the streets of Konoha, and everywhere Kyuubi went she attracted attention. The redhead just ignored it however, as she walked through the street and made her way towards the red light district. She was forced to stop as several thugs walked in front of her. Well, look at what we've got here, one of the men said with a lecherous grin. Kyuubi almost wrinkled her nose as she picked up the scent of alcohol on the men. The only stench stronger than sake was piss. Not an altogether pleasant thing to smell. What ya doing around these parts, doll? You lost? Kyuubi rolled her eyes at the remark. No, I'm not lost. I know exactly where I'm going, but I can only get there if you fucktwads get lost. Oh. Looks like the chickie has some spirit. She won't have it for very long. I say we take her into an alley and have some fun with her. Then we can have fun with her friend. Kin closed in behind Kyuubi and gripped her arm. Looking over at the dark-haired girl, she said, let go. I can't fight with these men with you clinging to me. Kin looked reluctant but a glare from Kyuubi made her do as asked. The redhead turned back to the thugs and shot her glare at them. I hope you've enjoyed the life you've lived so far because the moment you threatened me with rape they were forfeit. The thugs all looked at each other, confused. Hey, is this broad serious? Beats me. What can she do? Let's get her. As the men began running at her Kyuubi smirked. Then she disappeared. Several flashes of light appeared around the men, too many to count and too many to see. Kyuubi reappeared a few seconds later, crouched down behind the men and her hand glowing with a sharp red energy. For a moment time seemed to stand still, not a soul moved nor dared breath. Then Kyuubi stood up and all of the men fell down, blood gushing out of the slash wounds she created on them. Smirking, she turned back to Kin and gestured for her. Come, we're almost to Naruto-sama's. Kin quickly caught up with the redhead and stuck close. Naruto-sama lives here? She asked in a hushed voice, as if just speaking out loud would bring more goons back. In a place like this? For the moment, yes, Kyuubi answered. Though not for long if she had anything to say about it. There was no way her mate, the descendant of someone she respected above all else and as a person who held her respect himself was going to be living in such a dump for long. If Naruto didn't end up moving himself, or getting his old man to find him a decent place to live, then she was going to get him a house. A nice mansion that would make even those Hyugas jealous. But for the moment, getting Naruto out of this shithole would have to wait until later. She walked up to the door, which she had at least noticed looked better than when she had been sealed inside of her blonde mate, and knocked on the door. There was some shuffling from the inside before it opened, and Naruto looked at her. "Hey, Kyuubi-heim," he said with a grin as he opened the door all of the way. "I've missed you." He leaned in for a kiss, only to be met with her hand. Blinking, he looked at as she gave him a smile. "Narubunshin, as much as I love Naruto, you're not really him," she said brightly. "No offense, but I prefer the real thing." "Okay." "Ha." Kyuubi's sweat dropped as she saw the Naruto clone crouch down in a corner of the room with a rain cloud hanging over his head. She decided to ignore the now depressed Bunshin as Kin entered the room. "Make yourself at home," while Narubunshin pulls himself back together. Okay," Kin said. She looked around the room before sitting down on one of the couches. It was hard and lumpy, but she ignored that in favor of looking at her surroundings. There was another knock on the door that caused her to jump. The Naruto clone seemed to magically pull himself together at the knock and walked over to open the door, and Kin looked over when she heard several voices. "Hey Tu-san, what's up?" A sigh came from whoever was at the door. "I hope you know how hard it was to accomplish this without anyone noticing. Are you telling me that the legendary Yondaime Hokage had trouble faking the death of a single girl?" asked Naruto. Kyuubi looked over at Kin when those words were said and nearly lost it when she saw the wide-eyed flabbergasted look on the raven-haired girl's face. She wondered if Kin was more shocked at hearing the Yondaime Hokage was alive, or if the Yondaime Hokage was Naruto's old man. "I'm beginning to think you don't appreciate just how much I'm doing for you. Consider this making up for 13 years of not being here." "Ugh, I should have figured you'd hold that over me." There was a pause. "She's at the new house I got for you." "You got me a house?" "Really? At least that means I don't have to buy a house for you, Narubunshin," Kyuubi said from her spot. At the sound of her voice, Minato walked around Naruto and over to her. He stopped just a few feet from her with an unreadable expression on his face. However, Kyuubi wasn't worried. Even if Minato decided to attack her, she could stop him. Now that she had a mating mark, it was impossible for her to be sealed even if he summoned the Shinigami again to do it. "Kyuubi," Minato said after nearly a minute of silence. "Sochi had told me about you, and how you're more or less working with him as a partner." Given his choice of words, Kyuubi wondered if she knew just how close she and Naruto actually were. It was hard to tell, she had to admit. Minato had a mean poker face. "I want you to know that the only reason I'm trusting you is because my Sochi trusts you." "That's fine," Kyuubi said with a shrug. "Your trust isn't something I really care about. Naruto-sama's demon blood may be active, but yours is still so weak I can only feel it as a pinprick of energy. As I said to Naruto-sama, I don't really care for humanity. The only reason I am willing to even help out around here is because Naruto-sama sees more worth in keeping Konoha alive than seeing it decimated." Minato nodded as if having expected the remark. He turned back to Naruto and said, "We should get going now. I don't really like that you had to live in a dump like this, and I'm not going to let you stay here if I have any say about it." "Right, and besides, we still have to reintroduce Kin to her long-lost friend," Naruto said. As everyone began leaving, Kin sat there blinking, wondering what the blonde meant by his words. "Come on, Kin." "Ah!" Kin stood up and began running towards the door. "Wait up, I'm coming. With Naruto, Tenzaka-gai." Naruto whistled as Hana walked out of the changing room of the small shop they had gone in a few minutes ago. Naruto had decided when he saw her that Hana was a rather attractive kunoichi. He may not have any interest in mating with the Inuzuka, nor did he feel the desire to be physical intimate with the woman, but there was no denying the woman's physical beauty. Like all kunoichi, she kept herself in great shape, and had the same hourglass figure many female kunoichi in their late teens to even their late 30s had. And while she wasn't as feral as her clan, there was still a distinct hint of ferocity and an alpha-like presence to her. However, with the black slinky spaghetti strap dress, which stopped just above mid-thigh, she looked even more attractive. She was also wearing a light amount of makeup, some red lipstick, and just a hint of purple eyeshadow and blush. Her hair was being worn down, instead of the ponytail, and it had a brilliant shine to it thanks to the beauty parlor he had taken her to just a few minutes ago. "You, my dear, look absolutely stunning," Naruto complimented with a grin. It was nice seeing Hana's cheeks turn a lovely shade of red. Inuzuka women were not into showing off their feminine sides to anyone, and he doubted they were as crazy and feral as most rumors made them out to be. However, Naruto was sure that did not mean they neglected their own femininity, and Hana was much softer than the other Inuzuka he had seen. Do you think so?" she asked, blushing as she looked at herself. Though she stayed in the same spot and her feet never left the ground, the way she moved her body and legs allowed the bottom of her dress to swish around, revealing more of her legs to Naruto. "Of course I do," Naruto said. He held his hands behind his back as he walked up to her. "If it weren't for the fact that you're Kiba's sister, I would probably take you right here." A chuckle escaped him as he saw Hana's blush turn an even more lovely shade of red. He sighed, "Alas, I must stick to the bro code, so the sister of a friend is off limits." He absently wondered if he could actually consider Kiba friend. It was true that they had been the most similar in class. While Sasuke may have been his rival, it was Kiba who he competed against in the realm of pranking. It was something he would have to think about later, he supposed. Hana blinked at him, a sense of confusion passing through her eyes. What? Nothing for you to worry about," Naruto said dismissively. Running a hand through his hair, he looked himself over. For this mission, Naruto had chosen to wear a nice black tux with an orange tie. He had to admit that he looked rather good in a tux, even if wearing them felt constricting. He looked back at Hana and smiled. Holding out his arm, he said, "Shall we?" Hana looked at him for a moment before grabbing his arm. Together the two once again made their way to the gambling parlor Tsunade had been seen going. They had been staking out the place for 2 days, learning Tsunade's habits and having Shikamaru come up with the best plan to capture her should convincing the woman to return prove fruitless, and she made an attempt to bolt. As he stared at the door to the gambling parlor, Naruto smiled. "You ready?" he asked the Inuzuka female next to him. "As I'll ever be." The room was dark, smoke was wafting through the air, emitting an acrid scent that cloyed at the throat. The smoke in the room was so thick that many actually had trouble seeing their hand in front of their face. This was the kind of room one would expect to find in a mob boss's hideout, where Yakuza members hung around and did whatever the hell they felt like. Only this was no Yakuza hideout, this was a poker tournament. One of the highest caliber, in which the amount of money being bet was enough to buy a city on the scale of Tenzaka-gai. Tsunade frowned as she looked at the cards in her hand. Like always, they weren't very good: 1 pair of 2s, a 5, a 9, and a jack. There wasn't much she could get with that kind of hand, and there was very little if any chance of her winning. Not like such a bad hand ever stopped her from playing anyways. "I'm all in, double or nothing," she said, pushing her nearly half of her chips into the pot. All around, the men she was betting against were laughing to themselves. Tsunade had truly proven herself to be the legendary sucker, the woman who never wins a bet of any kind. No one in their right mind would turn down a bet made by her. It was a guaranteed win for them. "Excuse me." Everyone turned at the sound of the voice. Entering the darkened room was a young man who looked to be around 18 years of age. He had long and wild-looking spiky blonde hair, blue eyes, and lean features. He was rather attractive in Tsunade's opinion. If she had an itch that needed scratching at the moment, she might have even put the moves on him after the tournament. On his arm was a rather attractive young woman around the same age. She had lustrous brown hair and brown eyes with a hint of eyeshadow. Her dress accentuated her curves. Though she looked more like an accessory to the centerpiece the blonde male represented. "Who are you?" asked one of the many gamblers that had been just about to accept Tsunade's double or nothing bet. "Can't you see we're in the middle of a game? Come back later, brat." "Ah, now don't be like that," the blonde male said in a condescending voice. He walked over to the table and Tsunade watched as he placed a briefcase on it. Unlocking the latches, he opened the contents and spun it around. Tsunade's, along with the jaw of everyone else currently playing the high-stakes poker game, dropped their jaws at the sight of what had to be billions of Rio worth in diamonds. "I was hoping I could get an in with this game." Tsunade eyed the young man in interest as the other gamblers conferred with each other. There was just something about him that made her feel wary. Like he was a hunter that was currently stalking its prey. The only question she could wonder was just who was his prey. After a few minutes, the men that had been conferring with each other nodded in agreement. "All right, kid, you're in. I just hope you won't mind it when we take all of those precious gems of yours." "Not at all," the blonde replied, sitting down at an empty seat at the table. The woman came up to his left and placed a hand on his shoulder, rubbing it up and down sensually. If you can beat me, that is. Though I must warn you, his eyes flickered to Tsunade's, who flinched back. He grinned. I've been told I have the devil's luck. Back in Konoha. Tayuya! Kin shouted as soon as she had fully entered the house that Minato had procured for his son. It was built into the side of the Hokage monument by being cut out by earth ninjutsu specialists. The entrance to the place was on the top of the mountain and descended to the actual building via a stairway. The rooms were all well furnished with tasteful furniture that made the place look homey. Having never lived in a place like this, the Naruto clone decided his creator would probably like this kind of house. Ha! Tayuya looked up at the shout and found herself being held in the vice grip of Kin. Hey! What the fuck? Get off me! Get off! Ha ha ha! I had wondered who they were talking about. Kin said with a joyous expression on her face. I hadn't realized you left Oto. I hadn't, at least not in the way you're thinking, Tayuya said. She pointed over to Naruto. Shithead over there captured me and the others and, ack. Before she could say another word, a tail had wrapped around Tayuya's throat and picked her up. Kin let out a scream while the redhead grabbed and clawed at the tail, only to stop when she came face to face with the other redhead in the room. Now you listen here, you fucking twat. Kyuubi spat out as the girl in her grasp shook and shivered worse than a leaf being blown around in a hurricane. If I ever hear you refer to Naruto-sama by any other name other than Naruto-sama, I will rip your fucking spine out of your back and use it to beat you to death. I will ensure that you suffer a fate so terrible that even a demon lord would shiver in fear. Do you understand? Tayuya's eyes bulged, not only due to lack of air, but also because of the killing intent Kyuubi was blasting her with. The younger redhead could literally see herself being ripped to shreds by this girl, being impaled by Kyuubi's tails before she was pulled apart. Several versions of her death flashed before her eyes, each one more gruesome than the next. So frightening were these deaths and the killing intent that came with it that Tayuya actually lost control of her bladder. Kyuubi growled when the girl didn't answer her. She was just about to squeeze harder when a hand was placed on her shoulder. Turning her head, Kyuubi made to snarl at the person who dared touch her. However, when she saw that it was Naruto's clone, she just blinked. Put her down, Kyuubi-hime, he said calmly. I really don't want to have to deal with any violence right now, especially since I would like her alive. Kyuubi's mouth opened in surprise. But she just called you. I know what she called me, Naruto said, interrupting the woman from talking. She called me that the moment she saw me enter her hospital room after the invasion. But that doesn't matter. What does is that if you keep putting out that much killing intent, the seals that are designed around this place to keep our energy levels concealed will collapse, and then all of Konoha will be in a panic. I have better control of my Yuki and killing intent than that, Kyuubi said with a huff. Despite her words, Kyuubi's power and killing intent began dwindling. But you do have a point. Best not leave things to chance. She then turned on the redhead still in the grasp of one of her tails and glared at her. However, you will refer to Naruto-sama as I told you. I will not have some pathetic ninjen call my mate by such a disrespectful title. Do you understand? Tayuya quickly nodded, her eyes showing more fear than they ever had during her time working for Orochimaru. Good. Kyuubi said the girl down and then walked out of the room, likely to keep herself from blowing up. Kin ran up to her friend after the backlash from Kyuubi's killing intent that kept her in place had disappeared. Sorry about that, Naruto said, sighing a bit. She can be a bit of a handful. You're telling me, Tayuya hacked, holding a hand to her abused throat as she coughed. Who the hell is that? And what was up with the tail? That would be Kyuubi, Naruto said, grinning at the reaction he got from Tayuya. Kin had been informed by Kyuubi herself a few days ago, so the news didn't shock her. And before you ask, no, she was not killed by my two-san, she was sealed, and yes, she is out of the seal, and no, she won't kill you unless you piss her off. Stay on her good side and you'll have nothing to worry about. Tayuya snapped her mouth shut when the blonde answered the questions she had just been about to ask. Now down to why you're both here, Naruto said as he sat down on a couch. Kin and Tayuya took the other one, and Naruto noticed that Kin was sitting awfully close to the redhead. Guessing that she was still uncomfortable around men, he decided to get to the point. I want you both to work for me, said Kin, scratching the back of her head. What do you mean, Naruto-sama? Tayuya gave Kin an incredulous stare, but the raven-haired girl ignored it as she looked at Naruto. What I mean is I want you to work for me, he reiterated, pointing to each of them in turn. I doubt either of you know, as Orochimaru was never one to trust others, but he was once the member of a group of S-rank criminals called Akatsuki. Apparently my Kyofu, Jiraiya, managed to find out about them while tracking his teammates' movements. We don't know exactly what their endgame is, but we know what they want. The 9 Demon Lords, or if you want to go by their human title, the Bijou. Recently the original Naruto had a run-in with a few of the Akatsuki's members in Oto Fuchingai. He managed to drive them off relatively easily. Well, if he beat them so fucking easily, then what the fuck does he need us for? Asked Tayuya. I suggest you learn to watch your tongue, Kyuubi said as she re-entered the room. Tayuya paled as she turned her head to look at her fellow redhead, who happened to be glaring at her. While this Naruto may be a clone, I won't have you address him with such disrespect. You will curb your choice of words, or I will remove your tongue. Tayuya gulped, but nodded and vowed never to get on the redhead's bad side. The reason I need your help is because while I may be equipped to deal with the Akatsuki, none of the other Jinchuriki are, Naruto said. As I understand it, the members of Akatsuki are each chosen specifically because their powers give them a leg up over a Jinchuriki. What they lack in raw power they make up for in cunning, and even a Jinchuriki who has completely mastered their bijou can only use so much of it before it kills them through poisoning. Humans simply weren't made to handle the energy of a demon. What I need is for you two to be my eyes in the world outside of Hai no Kuni. Because of my growing reputation from the invasion, and now that my status as the Yondaime son is known, traveling outside of Hai no Kuni will be difficult without getting into a lot of fights. And while I enjoy kicking ass as much as the next guy, I don't want to be responsible for slaughtering an entire brigade IWA ninja just because they wanted to get revenge on my father through killing me. So you want us to spy for you? Asked Kin. More like I want you to find all of the Jinchuriki, Naruto corrected. I want to know who they are, and if you can find out more about them as a person. What kind of people are they? What do they like? What do they hate? Anything you feel would prove useful. And what do we get out of this? Asked Tayuya with a skeptical gaze. How about your life? Said Kyuubi with a slight growl. Naruto put a hand in front of her and she turned away with a huff. As much as I hate to admit it, Kyuubi is partially correct, Naruto said. Should you work for me, you will be allowed to live. However, as you know at least some of what I want, should you choose not to, I will either have to erase your memory, which is very hard to do, or kill you. Both Kin and Tayuya gulped. However, you will also gain benefits from working for me that won't get anywhere else. At those words, the two former Oto Kunoichi perked up. The first is specialized training that will put you on par with any jonin in less than a year. The second is the freedom to move across the elemental nations without restrictions. The third is being under my protection from anyone who may seek to harm you, should you require it. How would we get that second one? Asked Kin. Getting unlimited freedom to move across the world was very hard to do. The reason was because each country required a different form of passport. Even a civilian can't cross the borders of one country and into another without the proper passports. It was even harder for a shinobi, if not outright impossible. Thanks to Jiraiya's spy network, we've been able to create passports for each nation, Naruto said. They're not fakes, but actual passports that were created by using a fourth party to buy them from each country, and a third party to send them through various channels and dead ends that make it impossible for anyone to realize you would have them. And because your faces are only known by Konoha and Oto, and neither of you are in the bingo book, it won't be very hard for either of you to slip past most patrols without a problem. What about Konoha though? Said Kin. They know our face. Naruto smirked. They do, but Tayuya died in the hospital due to a heart failure caused by the cursed seal being removed upon Orochimaru's death, and you, Kin, disappeared after the Chunin exams. No one knows where you went and so assumed you died as well. While you two may look familiar, there's no possible way either of you could be Tsuchi-kin or Tayuya. I get where this is going, Tayuya said slyly. You're a sneaky bastard, you know that. I do try. So do you two agree? Asked Kyuubi, interrupting them so they could get things underway. Not like we have much choice, Tayuya said with a shrug. We're in. Naruto smiled. Alright, we'll begin training soon. I've actually got my old man in the process of building an underground training ground several miles outside of Konoha. When it is complete, that is where you will stay until your training is over. Why underground? Asked Kin. So no one can find you, of course, Naruto said with a grin, which turned decidedly evil a second later. Plus it would be a bitch if people started sensing Kyuubi's Yuki when she began training you. Both Kin and Tayuya went pale as they turned to see Kyuubi giving them a smile that was so sweet they knew it couldn't be real. The terrifying moment was broken however, when Minato, who had been silent up to this point suddenly asked, "What did Kyuubi mean when she called you her mate?" With Naruto, Tenzaka guy. The smile never left Naruto's face as he was dealt another hand of cards. From the moment he had entered the room the blonde Uzumaki had been dominating the poker match. Out of the 15 rounds that had passed, he had only lost 2 and now the stack of chips in his possession was the quadruple the amount it had been. 5 of the 7 original players had also been forced to fold, having lost all of their money and in one case the clothes on his back. "I fold," the last male player besides him had said. He tossed his cards on the table and got up. "Looks like it's just you and me," Naruto said, turning to Tsunade with a smile. Behind him Hana was practically hanging on him, she leaned over and kissed his cheek for good luck as the next match began. He couldn't help but think the Inuzuka was playing her role perfectly. "So it seems," Tsunade commented warily. Had it not been for the fact that it would ruin his poker face, Naruto would have laughed. Throughout the entire tournament he had been playing with her in small ways. Not to make her slip, Tsunade's luck was so bad she would never need it. But so that he could gauge her reactions, and he had to admit it was kind of fun watching her squirm. At first it was just light flirting, a compliment here, a slight innuendo there. It wasn't hard. Tsunade was a beautiful woman, at least when in her henge. She was a fairly tall light-skinned woman with light brown eyes and straight blonde hair. Her hair is waist-length with shoulder-length bangs framing both sides of her face, and was tied in 2 loose ponytails in the back. She had a slender yet noticeably curvaceous frame, and if Jiraiya were to be believed she had 106 cm breast circumference, which was the equivalent of a DD-sized chest. Possibly the oddest thing about her was the purple rhombus on the center of her forehead. Her outfit consisted of a grass-green robe with the kanji for gamble, cake, written in black on the back, inside a red circle. Underneath she wore a gray, kimono-style blouse with no sleeves, held closed by a broad, dark bluish-gray obi that matches her pants. Her blouse was closed quite low, revealing her sizable cleavage. She had on open-toed sandals with high heels and polish on both her fingernails and toenails. She also had on a soft pink lipstick. And finally, Naruto saw the Shodai Hokage's necklace in clear view on her chest. Beauty aside, Naruto wasn't dumb enough to say anything of an overtly sexual nature. He knew she hated perverts thanks to Jiraiya, so he made sure to keep his comments low-key. Not enough to insult and just enough to fluster and entice her. It helped that he knew she found him attractive. He would have to thank Kyuubi for helping him understand women when he got home. "I would like to up the wages, Tsunade," Naruto said as he placed 2 cards from his hand face down on the table. The dealer gave him 2 more cards and he looked at them with a slight smile. "Never one to back down from a high-stakes gamble?" Tsunade asked. "I take it you have something special in mind?" Naruto watched her take 3 cards from the dealer with a smile. "You could say that. Should you win this next hand, I will offer to pay off every single one of your debts and you won't owe me a dime." Tsunade's eyes widened. Her debt had to be running somewhere around 2 billion ryo by now. Only a daimyo possibly had enough money to pay off that kind of debt. For anyone to say they would pay off that much of her debt, especially in the nonchalant tone he had used, was inconceivable. She quickly regained her composure. "And if I lose?" The smile Naruto gave her was considerably predatory as he said, "If you lose, you will come back to Konoha with me." That's it for part 7. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.